The office smelled like fresh coffee and printer paper. It was a Tuesday evening in late October, and most of my colleagues had already left for the day. The last light was going gray over the parking lot outside, and I was finishing up a client file before heading home. The radiator ticked quietly against the wall. Everything felt settled. Ordinary. Like a life I had earned one careful day at a time. That was when my phone buzzed. A text from my dad. 3 words. We're outside. Talk. I put the phone face down on my desk. I sat with it for a moment. The way you sit with something you've been expecting for a long time. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't panicked. I just breathed and looked at the stack of folders in front of me. Each one representing someone else's problem that I had learned to solve cleanly. Professionally. Without emotion getting in the way. Then I picked up my phone. Walked to the window. And looked down. There they were. My dad standing by a silver pickup truck. Hands in his jacket pockets. Shoulders up against the cold. And beside him, my older brother Derek. Taylor. Pacing a slow half-circle on the sidewalk, the way he always did when he was rehearsing something in his head. They hadn't changed much. 3 years had a way of leaving people exactly where they were. I went back to my desk. I opened my bottom drawer. I took out a manila envelope I had kept there for 11 months. Then I called down to the front desk and told them to send my visitors up. I should tell you about my mother first. Because this story really begins with her. She built the family dry cleaning business from nothing. 40 years ago. She and my dad opened a small shop in Mississauga, Ontario. On a street that smelled like detergent and bus exhaust. They worked 6 days a week. My dad handled the equipment. My mom handled everything else. The books. The customers. The vendors. The taxes filed on time to the CRA every year without fail. She was meticulous. She was the kind of woman who kept receipts in labeled envelopes and balanced her accounts to the dollar. By the time I was old enough to understand what they had built. There were 3 locations. Not big. Not flashy. But stable. Clean. Paid off. Something real. My brother Derek was 11 years older than me. And from the time I can remember, he was being groomed to take over. My dad never said it out loud. But it was in everything, the way Derek sat at the table during dinner when business came up. The way my dad would explain things to him, like he was already the owner. And I understood that. Derek was the oldest. I didn't feel cheated by it when I was young. What I felt cheated by came later. My mom got sick when I was 22. Pancreatic cancer. Diagnosed in February. Gone by August. 6 months. I had just finished my diploma at Humber College. Was studying for my real estate license. They was making plans the way you do at 22 when you think the future is wide open and cooperative. Instead, I moved back home to Mississauga and spent those 6 months sitting with her. Driving her to appointments at Credit Valley Hospital. Learning how to manage her medications. Sleeping in the chair beside her bed the last few weeks because she didn't want to be alone at night. Derek visited on weekends when he could. My dad was there. But he went quiet in the way. Some people go quiet when they can't process something. He focused on the shops. Worked longer hours. Came home late and tired, and not much use to anyone. I don't say that with bitterness. Grief does strange things to people. What I say with bitterness is what happened after. My mom passed on a Thursday morning in August. We buried her the following Monday. By the following Friday, my dad had sat Derek and me down at the kitchen table and told us he was making Derek a co-owner of all 3 locations. He said it was what my mom would have wanted. He said the business needed someone full-time. Someone who had been part of it from the beginning. Someone stable. I was 22. I had spent 6 months giving up my life to be there. And I sat at that table and listened to my dad explain. In the gentle voice of a man who believed he was being fair. That I would receive a modest one-time payment of $12,000 from the business account as my share of my mother's contribution. And that going forward, the business would belong to him and Derek. $12,000. In a country where a 1-bedroom apartment in Mississauga runs $1,200 a month. That was 10 months of rent. That was what 6 months of my life. And my mother's 40 years. Amounted to in that conversation. I didn't cry. I signed the document they put in front of me. I went back to my old bedroom that night and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then I got up the next morning, moved out, and got back to work on my real estate license. I passed my exam 8 months later. I joined a brokerage in Mississauga. Started from scratch. Spent 2 years learning the market and building a client base, the only way that works slowly. Honestly, call by call. I was good at it. I liked the problem solving of it. The paperwork. The negotiation. I liked being someone people trusted with the largest transaction of their lives. During those 2 years, I spoke to my dad occasionally. Holidays. His birthday. Surface-level calls that stayed carefully away from anything real. Derek and I barely spoke at all. There was no dramatic falling out. No screaming match. No moment I could point to. Just a slow, quiet withdrawal on both sides. Like two people who had decided, without saying so out loud, that there wasn't much left worth pretending about. Then, about 1.5 years into my career, I got a call from my bank. There was a joint line of credit on my file. $42,000. Opened 14 months earlier. In my name and my dad's name. Secured against the family business assets. It had been drawn down fully. Payments had been made for the first 6 months. Then stopped entirely. The account was now 90 days in arrears. I remember sitting in my car in the parking lot of a Shoppers Drug Mart and asking the woman on the phone to repeat that back to me 3 times. I had not signed anything. I had not been present for anything. I had never agreed to anything. But my signature was on the documents. A notarized copy. Dated from a Tuesday, I had spent showing condos to a young couple in Brampton. I spent that night making notes. I called the bank the next morning and formally disputed the account. I hired a paralegal to send a letter to my dad and Derek. The response I got back, through an intermediary, was that the money had been used to keep the business afloat after a difficult year. That as a daughter and sister I had a responsibility to the family. And that making a legal issue out of it would cause damage to everyone. What I did next was something I am still proud of. I did not make a legal issue out of it publicly. I consulted a lawyer. Documented every piece of evidence I had. The bank's fraud investigation file. The date discrepancy. The notarization details. 2 witnesses who could confirm my location on the day the signature was supposedly made. I organized it all into a folder. I kept it in my desk drawer at the office. And then I paid off the line of credit myself. All $42,000. Over 18 months. Out of my own commissions. I closed the account cleanly so it would not affect my credit score or my real estate license with Rico. And then I went quiet. Not the quiet of someone who has given up. The quiet of someone who has decided to wait for the right moment. And in the meantime, to build something that cannot be taken from her. Over the following 2 years, I did exactly that. I moved up within the brokerage. I built a client base that ran on referrals. I got my broker's license. By the time my dad texted me that Tuesday evening in October, I was 2 months away from opening my own small brokerage, 5 agents. A leased office in a newer building just off here, Ontario. A business I had funded myself through a clean commercial loan from my credit union. No cosigners. No family. Nothing that could be undone by someone else's decisions. I had not spoken to my dad in 8 months. I had not spoken to Derek in over a year. And yet there they were. Standing in my lobby while I waited for the elevator doors to open. My dad looked older. The lines around his eyes had deepened. And he carried himself with the particular tiredness of a man who had been dealing with something he didn't want to talk about for a long time. Derek looked the same as he always had, big. Restless. With the kind of confidence that has never been seriously challenged and doesn't know what to do with itself in a room where it isn't in charge. I showed them into the small meeting room off the main office. I offered them water. My dad took a cup. Derek didn't. I sat down across from them and waited. My dad started. He said he was glad I was doing well. He said he had heard about the new brokerage, and that he was proud of me. He said it the way people say things when they're building up to something they know you won't want to hear. Stacking up goodwill. Like sandbags before a flood. Then he told me about Derek's situation. The 3 dry cleaning locations had been consolidated down to 1. Then that one had closed 18 months ago. The building they had owned outright. The original shop. which had been paid off for over a decade, had been mortgaged twice since my mother's death to cover operating losses. The second mortgage had gone into default. They were looking at a power of sale proceeding from the lender, which meant the property would likely be sold, and any equity gone. Derek, in the meantime, had opened a new venture, a commercial laundry operation, larger scale, servicing hotels and medical facilities. He had taken on a private investor for the startup costs and was waiting on a contract from a regional hospital group in Brampton. The investor was now demanding repayment on his own timeline, regardless of where the contract stood. They needed money to hold the investor off long enough for the hospital contract to come through. My dad looked at me across the table and said, $60,000. A short-term bridge. Family to family. Documented as a loan, if I preferred. With the expectation it would be repaid within 8 months, when the contract funded. I looked at my brother. Derek was looking at the table. I said, "And if I don't?" My dad glanced at Derek. Derek looked up. He said there was another option. That given my real estate career, given my license, given my brokerage, there were ways a complaint to Reco could complicate my professional standing. He said he wasn't suggesting anything improper. He said he was just noting that families who were under financial stress sometimes made decisions they wouldn't otherwise make, and that it would be a shame for a professional misunderstanding to get in the way of what I had built. He said it very carefully. The way people say things when they want plausible deniability about what they've just said. I sat with that for a moment. The radiator in the corner ticked. Somewhere in the building. A phone rang and went to voicemail. I said, "Can you give me a few minutes? I need to get something from my desk." I walked to my office. I sat down. I did not take more than 3 minutes. Because I had known for 11 months exactly what was in that manila envelope, and I did not need to review it. I thought about my mother. I thought about the Tuesday mornings she used to call me. After I moved out, just to check in. I thought about the way she kept her files labeled. Alphabetical. Color-coded by year. I thought about what she would have done in this room. Then I picked up the envelope and went back. I set it on the table between us. I said before we continue, "I want to walk you through a few things." I opened the envelope and laid out the documents in order. I had 3 things. The first was the bank's original fraud investigation file, including the date stamp on the notarization and the signed witness statements confirming my location. The second was the loan repayment record 18 monthly transfers from my personal account, totaling $42,462, with interest. The third was a 1-page legal summary, prepared by the lawyer I had consulted, outlining the elements of the original offense: fraud, forgery of a financial document, and identity theft under Canadian law. I told them I had never reported it. Not to the police. Not to the bank's fraud department, beyond the initial dispute. Not to anyone. I told them I had paid it out of my own pocket because I did not want the legal proceeding. And because at the time I had hoped it was something we could move past. My dad had gone very still. I told them that a formal complaint to Reco about my real estate license would trigger a review. That review would, in the ordinary course, invite me to provide any documentation relevant to my professional standing. That I would, of course, provide everything I had. That a fraud file involving a forged financial document in my name, prepared by members of my family, would then become part of a formal record, not mine, but theirs. Derek started to say something. I held up one hand. I wasn't finished. I said that I had also spoken 3 weeks ago. To the lawyer again, not because I had been planning this conversation specifically, but because I had been preparing for my brokerage launch and wanted to make sure all my personal financial records were clean. During that conversation, I had asked whether there was a statute of limitations on the original offense. In Ontario, fraud involving a forged financial document has no fixed limitation period when the fraud is discovered within a reasonable time frame. The clock, as my lawyer had put it, had not run out. I put the documents back in the envelope. I said, "I am not going to give you $60,000. I am not going to give you any amount. I am not going to be threatened about my professional license by people who used my identity to take out a loan without my knowledge, and then disappeared for 3 years." My dad said my name. Just my name. Quietly. And the way he used to say it when I was a child, and he was trying to reach me. I said, I know. Dad. I said it without anger. I meant it without anger. There was something underneath it that wasn't anger, something sadder. And older. And more tired than anger. I said, I know this isn't where you thought we'd end up. I know Mom would not have wanted this. But what happened to that line of credit was wrong. And what Derek just said to me in this room was wrong. And I have spent 2 years building something that I am not going to let either of you damage, because you're in a difficult situation that I had no part in creating. Derek said you could have helped us when we needed it. When the business was struggling. You could have stepped up. I looked at him for a long time. I said I gave 6 months of my life when Mom was sick. I was 22 years old. I gave up my plans, and I sat with her so she wouldn't be alone at night. And then I sat at the kitchen table and signed a document that gave me $12,000 and removed me from everything she built over 40 years. And then someone forged my name on a loan I knew nothing about, and I paid it off myself without saying a word to anyone, because I didn't want to blow up what was left of this family. I said I stepped up. You just weren't looking. The room was very quiet. My dad had his hands flat on the table. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the envelope. I said I need you both to leave now. I have a client call at 7. Derek stood up first. He didn't say anything. He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair and walked out of the meeting room without looking at me. I heard the elevator button being pressed in the hallway. My dad stayed seated for another moment. He said I didn't know about the loan. Not until it was already done. I looked at him. He said Derek told me it was something you had agreed to. A family arrangement. I should have asked you directly. I should have called you. I said yes. He said I'm sorry for that. I sat with those words. I had waited a long time for them, and now that they were here they felt smaller than I had imagined. And also more real. Not a resolution. Just a sentence. Something true that had been left too long unsaid. I said I know. Dad. He stood up slowly. The way older men stand up from chairs. Gathering himself. He picked up his coat. He looked at the envelope one more time. He said, are you going to report it? I said I don't know yet. That depends on what Derek does next. But I need you both to understand that I have everything I need to. And that the conversation that happened in this room tonight, Derek's comment about the RICO complaint, is something I'm going to document before I go home tonight. My dad nodded slowly. He said that's fair. He walked out. I heard the elevator again. The muffled sound of the lobby door below. I sat in the meeting room alone for a few minutes. The radiator ticked. The parking lot outside was dark now. Orange streetlight on wet pavement. Somewhere down on the street a go bus went by. The familiar rumble of it. Very ordinary and very steady. I gathered the documents back into the envelope. I straightened the chairs. I turned off the light. That evening I wrote a 4-paragraph memo to myself. Time-stamped. Detailing the conversation, what was said. Who said it? The sequence of it. I emailed it to myself and to my lawyer. Not as a first step toward anything. As a record. As the kind of careful documentation my mother would have approved of. I drove home on the 401. The highway loud and bright, and full of people going to all their separate lives. I stopped at a Tim Hortons drive-thru on the way because it was 9 o'clock and I hadn't eaten since noon. I sat in the parking lot with a sandwich and a medium coffee, and I let myself feel everything for a little while. The grief underneath the anger, underneath the strange. Quiet relief of having finally said the true thing out loud, to the people it needed to be said to. I didn't feel victorious. I want to be clear about that. Because this story isn't really about victory. I felt like someone who had been carrying a piece of furniture up a long staircase, and had finally put it down in the room where it belonged. In the weeks that followed, I heard from my dad once. He called on a Sunday morning and we talked for about 20 minutes, not about Derek. Not about money. Not about any of it. He asked about the brokerage launch. I told him about it. He asked if he could come see the office sometime. I said I'd think about it. Derek did not contact me. My brokerage opened in December. The week before Christmas. 5 agents. 2 administrative staff. A clean commercial lease with a 2-year term. A name I had chosen carefully, my own last name. Followed by the word realty. Simple and direct, and mine. On the opening morning, it was -14 outside, and the heat in the new office was still being sorted out, and we all stood around in our coats, drinking coffee and laughing about it. And I looked at the sign on the door and felt something I don't have a precise word for in English or in any other language. A friend asked me later that week if I ever thought about my family when I looked at the office. And I said yes. Of course. She asked if it made me sad. I thought about my mother. About the color-coded folders and the balanced accounts and the Tuesday morning calls. About what she would have said if she had been standing in that room with me in October, watching me lay those documents on the table. I said a little, but mostly it makes me feel like I understand something she was trying to show me all along. That what you build is yours. No one can sign their name to that. There is one more thing I want to tell you. About 6 weeks after the opening, I was going through some old boxes I had moved from my storage unit, things from when I had first moved out of the family home. Things I hadn't looked at in years. In one of the boxes, wrapped in a tea towel, I found a small green notebook with my mother's handwriting on the cover. Her accounts book from the original shop. The first one. From before I was born. I sat on my floor and read through it. Every page was a month. Every month had rows of careful numbers in blue pen income. Expenses. The cost of solvent and pressing equipment and hydro and rent, and the staff wages she paid every 2 weeks without fail. At the bottom of each month was the net. Circled. With a small note beside it. Not a percentage. Not a metric. Just a word or two. Good month. Held on. Slow but steady. Tough. Try again. Better. I sat with that notebook for a long time. Then I put it on the shelf in my office, next to my broker's license. I don't know what's going to happen with my father. I don't know what Derek is going to do. Or whether the hospital contract came through. Or whether any of it worked out. I made my peace with not knowing those things a while ago. What I know is what I have in front of me, the work. The files. The clients who call because someone they trusted sent them to me. The agents in my office who show up every morning and do the hard, quiet work of building something real. My mother built 3 locations over 40 years. One careful month at a time. I'm on year 1. I have time.